Good evening, Facebook family. We just want to welcome y'all here to another Marriage Monday here with Nick and Trina Brinson. We just want to thank you for joining in with us tonight when you get ready to come in. And tonight we got a pretty good topic that can apply to everybody. And we think that it will help you out if you apply some of the principles and do and let it be an example for the things that you have to do if you ever come in. And if you ever get in a conflict with somebody. So these are the ways we're going to talk about the rules of fighting fair or fair fighting. So when we get ready to start our broadcast tonight, as far as going over the lesson, we will go into some of those subtopics. All right. Who we got coming in? You got something you want to say to the people?
No, I was just listening to your introduction.
Okay.
So we got a lot of folks. I think they were ready for us. We were a few minutes late today, just because life is what we live in. And we work a full day before we come on. So sometimes it's a little hectic, but we are here. So yeah, we know a little bit about fighting. We have some experience in that area. So we can definitely share a little bit of insight, probably a lot of insight on this topic of fair fighting. We've done it poorly and we've done it well. So I think it's an excellent topic, and sometimes a topic that people don't realize they need to have skills in. You know, there's a way to hash out differences that don't have to end poorly. The goal is for those differences that you have for you to come to a resolution. So learning how to fight fairly will give you the skills that you need in order to let the fight be something beneficial rather than something that tears your relationship down. It should be something that where you end up stronger for having had that fight. So not all fighting within a marriage is bad. I mean, you can label it as a conflict, or some people call it domestic dispute or discussion, however you want to label it. Anytime you have two adults together that are married, you are going to have opportunities to have some confrontations or some conflict. And how you handle that will determine if your relationship is stronger for it, or if those confrontations actually tear your marriage down. So, hello, Mother.
Hello, Mommy.
Hello, children. So I'll be forming say hello, Mother. We have lots of people that are joined on already, so we're gonna keep it moving. Well, not lots, but we certainly glad to see y'all. We were talking this week that we're always surprised at the people that are joining in with this effort, that are watching the recorded versions, or the go back and watch the live event as a recording. So we're always encouraged by that, and to realize that we're reaching people that we might not otherwise have these types of conversations with. So we always welcome input from those of you that are here live, as well as input from people who are watching it as a recording. You can always type those comments in, because when others watch it, they will see those comments. And sometimes we see those comments as well. Sometimes I go back and try to make sure I at least read through the comments to see if we missed anything that needs to be addressed. So we just encourage that.
Right, and just a little side note, we've actually been doing this for a year.
Well, so we're clarify doing what?
Doing the Marriage Mondays for a year,
right?
As far as Facebook, but we've been a part of marriage ministry almost as long as we've been married. Some point,
just about
or another. So we've just been doing it live on Facebook for a year. So it's been a good year, I can say. But with that said, going into our lesson, anytime you're bringing two different entities together and they're trying to exist together, there is the thing that's inevitable is a conflict when you're bringing two different agencies together. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try to shed some light on ways to soften those blows. Because, you know, we talked extensively with our bishop about, you know, fighting. And sometimes you cut people when you cut them deep, and you leave them
wounded
and bleed. And that's not what you want when you're trying to get through conflict and try to bring two different people together to become one. And it's definitely a challenge to do that.
Mm-hmm. How would you say that what are some thoughts you have about how we have gone through conflicts poorly? Like, what do you remember, like, before we've learned how to be productive in our exchanges?
Well, we're going to go through some of those that I thought about when I was going through the lesson, but rehashing things that were not solved in the beginning, you got to come back to them because it was not solved. So instead of going through and solving it or coming back to it at a opportune time for both of you, it comes out as something else onto something else that has happened. It's called stockpiling.
So what you're saying is those old issues rear their head whenever there's an opportunity to have a conflict, even though it has nothing to do with the issue at hand.
Yes.
Right. And that's very common. And that is not fair fighting.
No.
That's not a way that's going to lead to a position of strength. That's one of those things that can tear your relationship down.
Okay.
Yelling.
Yeah, there.
Well, I know what we're going to go through, but I just want to talk about what we've done, just to make it personal, because we've had some fights. We hadn't had physical fights, but
no, we don't do.
I'm sure, but I'm sure plenty of people have. I
Right.
ain't gonna put it, out there as something so extreme that it's not commonplace.
Right.
Some people do get to that point of physical contact, even within a marriage. I mean, that's just the ugly truth for some people. So I don't want to sugarcoat it,
right.
just because we hadn't gotten to that close. We've been close. But
I've never been close to hitting you.
Well,
I don't know how you've been close to hitting me.
I've been close to hitting you. Oh,
well,
yeah.
see, that's the thing. I've never been close to hitting her Facebook family. So, I've always had that restraint with her not to get so mad that it can come to physical blows with me doing something to injure the relationship like that. So, my thing is I would leave before any of that happened. That's where I draw the line at. That's a
deal breaker.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Deal breaker.
Yeah. My dad told me long time ago, you don't stay there and try to fight no man. You don't do it. You come on home and we'll take care of whatever else have to be taken care of. So yeah, that's a deal breaker for me. But the truth of the matter is a lot of people deal with it.
Right.
So I don't want to shortchange it, like I say, or act like that's not a real issue for a lot of people. And I know a lot of women who will fight a man. I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah, they'll put up a good fight.
Yeah.
But,
so
it's not like I've never seen a confrontation between a man and a man and a woman that's married not go to blows. I've witnessed it a lot in my life, and I like I said, I'm a vicarious learner. I look at other people's issues and I try to learn from them. So nothing good came out of one of those people in my life hitting a woman. Nothing good came out of that. So, I said, before I hit a woman, I just leave. That's just something. That's where I'm gonna draw the line at. And I feel that way about my girls. There's no way a man should be able to put his hands on one of my girls. And I'm gonna give them the same talk that Trina Daddy gave her. If you feel like this is gonna come to a fight, you come on back home and we can take care of everything else after that. So, the rules of fighting fair, and another thing that we did was belittling. Each other. That's no. Mm-hmm. That just causes more frustration, more anger, more separation. It's not leading to peace is what it's not doing. So we did that.
Mm-hmm. And stonewalling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about those more, not thoroughly, but we're going to discuss several of these behaviors and talk about how to turn those into something positive. You want to start with number one?
Yeah, we'll start with number one. And this can help out in a lot of fights. If you just ask yourself this question: why am I mad in the first place? Why are we here? Why are we at this point? And maybe you can just talk it out once you figure out what's upsetting you. So when you do that and ask yourself, why am I upset? When you ask yourself those questions, you can solve some stuff in you, and that may allow you to bring out that topic a little softer, so it can be received by the other person. What you think?
Well, I think one way to look at it is, are you really angry because, your partner left the toilet seat up? Or are you upset because that's just one more thing? Like you've had these small issues that keep building up, and you feel that person's inconsiderate, or you feel that you're not being thought of. What's the real reason? You're not really mad because the toilet seat is up, although that is frustrating. One of my pet peeves. But that is not something that would really get you to the point of being upset. And so you really have to examine yourself before you open your mouth to say anything to your partner. Examine yourself and say, okay, what's the real reason? Why does that toilet seat upset me? It don't take but, a couple bits of pressure just to push it down. It's not really that big of an issue. So why is that upsetting me? Is it because I feel like, he's not doing enough housework, that he's leaving something else for me to do? Or, like I said, am I just building up evidence, collecting a bunch of evidence to try to support something I want to complain about? So you've got to really stop and take the time to think about your own feelings before you start an argument. And if you're able to know what you're really upset about, you're more likely to resolve what the underlying issue is. And so you're not stuck arguing about the toilet seat.
Right. Number one, identify your anger. Is basically what you're doing.
Right.
Identify why you're upset.
The reason why you're experiencing anger.
All right.
It can be something real petty to get you real upset.
All right, and another thing you can do is just discuss one topic at a time. When you do that, you keep the focus on the topic that's at hand. When that does not happen, I mentioned a term a few seconds ago called stockpiling. When you stockpile, just think about when you're trying to light a fire and you got one log on there. That one log gonna burn and it's gonna be hot if you set it on fire. But what happens when you add another log and another log? Then you throw some gas on it. So now you got a blaze, and that blaze is harder to put out than that one little log you had on there. And now you got something that's real hot that you're gonna have to learn how to try to take care of. And it's dangerous. So when you're thinking about that, thinking about, just staying with one topic at a time and try to stay within a time constraint to solve that problem. That's one thing we learned from the bishop was, take each topic and spend about 20 minutes on it, or maybe 10 minutes, or however long it takes. But try not to go over 20 minutes on one topic, because all you're going to do is just keep going back and forth. And then if you don't solve it, it may be time for a mediator to help you solve that problem. So don't stockpile your problem. You got things to do.
No, I think you covered it. Discuss one topic at a time, one issue at a time.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to do number 3? Mm-hmm. All right. The third point we want to discuss is no degrading language. Did you choose that specifically for me?
No.
It felt a little personal.
No, I didn't.
No degrading. No degrading language. Discuss the issue, not the person. And that's a big statement. You discuss the issue at hand, not discussing the person, because then that starts to feel like a personal attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no put downs, no swearing or cursing, no name calling. That's degrading language. And even though it's your attempt to express that you have negative feelings, your goal should not be to make the other person feel bad. That's not the goal. And that's what degrading someone leads to, is just making them feel bad about themselves when really that's not the issue. And so when you guard and be mindful about the language that you're using, the choice of words that you choose in your exchanges with that person, you're more likely to get a positive outcome rather than just, degrading that person or attacking that person. So be mindful of the words that you say.
And remember this, the person, when it's between a man and a woman, or a husband and a wife, your husband and your wife should be the closest person to you as far as a relationship. When they say something that is degrading, name calling, calling you out your name or put down, those words may cut a little bit deeper than if somebody else outside of that union say it. So, that's the closest person to you. They know some personal things about you. And if they use those personal things to degrade you, now you have an issue with trust with that person. And that's another thing that happens when you are in a relationship. That's why it's good not to use degrading language with people. People say, what's that saying? They say, words don't hurt, but sticks and stones may break bone, but
words never hurt.
Words do cut, though. They cut deep.
And it's important, too, that if your spouse is one who values words of affirmation, giving those harsh words cuts more deeply than it would when those words are said to someone for whom that's not one of their primary love languages. So just like, it can be powerful for you to give words of affirmation to your spouse who prefers that method of communicating love, it does that much more damage when you use that method of communicating, meaning giving negative words. It cuts more deeply than it would for someone whose love language it isn't.
All right. Express your feelings with words. I know for me, learning how to express my feelings in words was pretty tough because, I expected her to, when I say something, that she understood what I was talking about, but that was never the case. She got to tell me, well, how do you feel? What are you feeling? And, I had this tough man exterior, like, I'm not finna talk about my feelings with her. She done said something to hurt my feelings. I ain't finna, we're not finna go there. So I'm just gonna stonewall her. I ain't gonna say nothing to her. And how does that work? It doesn't. Because nothing was getting solved. Now, when I got to the point of actually learning how to express myself, I think some things started to work out a little bit better for us. Mm-hmm. And that was just me. She had no problem expressing herself at all.
Never have.
She did not.
Well, that's not true. I don't have trouble saying how I feel, but it's not always expressed in a way that's productive for other people. I can get it out, but it can be a little hurtful to the person on the other side. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can certainly put my words into feelings. That's never been an issue for me. And
then when she said something that got up under my skin, all I did was turn that into anger and just say what I had to say that was on my mind. It was not productive because at that point I was returning the hurt. Not saying anything to solve the problem. It was just the return of the hurt. Okay, you gonna open that can of worms? Oh, say we can go now. And that's not good for a relationship. You got to know who you are in your relationship and not let even your spouse put you in a position where you shouldn't have said what you said, but you said it anyway. And now you got to be the bearer of that hurt that you put on somebody else or your wife. So
there's a formula you can use if it doesn't come natural to you how to express those feelings. And there's a kind of a little quick formula. You would say, I feel blank, and in that blank you would put whatever that emotion is when blank, whenever whatever happens. So it's I feel blank, that's the emotion, when blank, and that's the event.
You feel frustrated when I
get too in my space too much.
Yeah.
Yes.
You feel mad when I upset. Y'all just threw that out of Facebook. She just looking at me like, we ain't talked about that. And we didn't.
I just didn't have anything on my mind. I would have to think about it. You really want me to think about some things that make me mad? You don't want me to do that.
Well,
yeah, you don't want me to do that.
It's space and opportunity for other people.
You don't want me to do that because you might not like it. I feel frustrated when you leave that toilet seat up or when you leave your shoes out in the middle of the night knowing that I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom and trip over them. It's a booby trap.
Yeah.
And so I feel frustrated when that happens.
See, she learned about one of my frustrations last week that I've never really said to her before is when we getting ready to do something like this, like Facebook Live, and she is eating and trying to discuss what we're going to talk about. I don't want to talk to you while you're eating. And she was like, where did that come from? I never expressed it to her. So she didn't know until then. So, and that's true.
What was my response?
You hadn't done that before. What was your response?
My response is that I'm starving when I come home from work. And I need to eat. And I'm trying to cram it in before we get on the camera.
Mm-hmm. And I understood that. So I was like, well,
that's necessary.
It is. But then that's one of my pet peeves. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Wow.
All right. Moving on. Take turns speaking. How important is that? Because when you're yelling at each other, who's hearing who? But when you're talking over each other.
Right, talking over each other. Because yelling is a different one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, when you're talking over each other, who's hearing who? How do you solve it?
See, the thing about taking turns is, and that's interesting because I work on that with children that are delayed in their communication skills. And it's funny, I work with a child today who doesn't quite have words. And so it's a big deal for her to learn that she has to listen to wait for her turn to talk. Because if you're fussing and protesting and not listening, you aren't learning anything from the other person that you're trying to have a conversation with. You don't know how to respond to that person's concerns because you aren't listening to understand. You just want to talk. And so if you're busy thinking about what you want to say and what you want to get across, then what you're not doing is listening with the intent to understand what your partner wants to convey to you. And it's a conversation goes back and forth. We can't have conversation if only one person is talking. That's a soliloquy or a monologue. Mm-hmm. That's not a dialogue. Dialogue means at least two people talking. And in order for you to respond appropriately to what a person is saying to you, you have to listen to what they are saying and respond to what they're saying. Sometimes it even helps to repeat back to them in your own words what you understood them to say. And that's something that I have to be intentional about just because we communicate so differently. And so I have to repeat back in my words. I don't just say what he said. I try to make sure I understood what he said and say it back to him to make sure I understood it. And a lot of times it's not. So what he intended for me to know may be something different from what I heard. Uh-huh. And the more that is done, the better you can become at communicating with each other. The more you learn how that person communicates.
All right. We talked about stonewalling, where when the argument, one person retreats and doesn't say anything, and we know doing that does not solve the issue.
Mm-hmm. That's what makes me mad, since you want to know what makes me mad.
Yeah, because I was a pro at doing that. Okay, I'm not finna get to the point where she makes me mad to the point where I want to feel like hitting her. So I was stonewalled instead of learning how to give myself and put myself in a situation to solve it with words, because I really didn't have the words to solve the issue with. She would say stuff just like the bishop say. She'd be like, and I'd be like, pow. She'd bring out her machine gun, and I'm like, pow. Why are you looking at me like that?
That's your musket.
That's all I had.
One shot.
And I was like, I'm not bringing this right here to this fight, so I'm just going to retreat back.
But this is why it's important to have skills.
Right.
Because your logic and reasoning for using stonewalling was your own logic and reasoning, but it was no better than what I was doing, which I guess might have been not taking turns or using, what was the other one? Degrading language or, over expressing feelings, whatever I was doing. It wasn't working. But neither was what you chose to do. And you pulled from what you know to do instead of, that was before you learned new skills in order to be able to communicate. And that's what we're really hoping to open up to you tonight is how necessary it is to learn skills for fighting fair. It doesn't come naturally for most people. And so you have to put some effort into learning how to restrain yourself and to use skills so that you can communicate effectively so that your fighting comes out fair. That don't mean you don't confront the problem. That's not what at all the issue. You do confront the problem. It's confronting the problem with some skills. That don't mean you can't have emotions while you're confronting the problem. But you have to have some skills and not damage the relationship in the process of trying to get beyond those conflicts.
Absolutely. And continuing on with no yelling, Mommy put a post in the chat, says a soft answer turns away wrath. There's more to that scripture. Good.
But a harsh word stirs up anger. That's Proverbs 15:1. Yeah.
That says a lot right there. I mean, that's one you can add to your repertoire of fighting fair. Proverbs 15:1. So important when you're having a conflict.
And see, that's one of those things that really takes skill. Because if somebody's yelling, it's not your natural instinct to choose to speak softly. So that takes some maturity, first of all, not to just run with your emotions. And it takes some self-discipline. And it takes some skill. Because the skill in it is knowing that that's what you need to do and actually doing it. But it takes some skill.
It takes some maturity.
And practice. Yes, I mean, you can't beat yourself up if you find yourself falling back into what you've done before. Just know and be aware that you got to do better. And be willing to apologize for those times when you recognize that, okay, I should have handled that better. Let me just say, I apologize for raising my voice. I do want to resolve this. Let's sit down and talk about it. And sometimes we didn't talk about it tonight, but when we talk about a formal system of conflict resolution, which is what we learned from Bishop Bush, and he's taught on it, we've taught on it in the past, and it's just a much more formal way to sit down and deal with conflict. But that's just where we were. We needed something very structured and very formal for conflict resolution. But one of the things that we didn't bring up, and it's on our list tonight, that I want to say is it's always a good idea to plan when you're going to sit down and deal with your problems. Because in the heat of the moment, a lot of times it's not the best time to deal with the issue. Or when you're rushing around trying to get ready to go to work and you got these time constraints on you, that's not the time to have those kind of conversations. And it takes skill to know that. It takes skill to be able to do that, to know that, okay, we're going to table this and come back to it. You don't have to act in those emotions just because you feel like you have to. And I had to learn that because I know that was one thing Bishop Bush said to me is, you don't have to, react in the midst of your emotions. You can hold on to it. And I was like, no, I can't. He was like, sure you can. I was like, I can't hold on. I got to deal with it right now. And he was like, sure you can. So that was a skill I had to learn from that bit of counsel. And so I had to learn to write it down, table it for later. And during that time that it was written down and I knew we had an appointment with each other, coming up the next day or two, that gave me time in between to think about it, to pray about it, and to kind of wrap my mind around it in a skillful way instead of just responding to it out of emotion.
Yeah, she just basically explained taking that time out when a situation comes up and you just need a person to, and you're in the midst of the conflict is what the time out is, but the way she explained it to you is the best way to do it. Don't get into the heat of the argument at that point. Wait, set aside a time, and come back to it. That was a conflict resolution that we learned from the bishop.
Did we go over no yelling?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is actually number 8. Take a time out. And what you're saying is correct because that's what we've done, and that has certainly worked for us. This is another strategy though that I remember Pastor Evelyn and Pastor Ted talking about this when we were in at our old church in marriage ministry, they would take a pause. They didn't call it a timeout. They called it a pause. They would hit the pause button. That's what it was. So when verbal exchange was getting too heated, either one of them had the power to hit the pause button. And that's literally what they would say or do is, all right, I'm pushing pause. And that means the conversation stops and it's addressed at a later time when the tensions are not so high. And that keeps everything from raising up, because the fact that you're getting, what's the word called? You dander up.
Yeah.
That term. That's an indicator that this is a conflict or an issue that needs to be addressed. And so hitting that pause button, which is, they're calling it a timeout in this article that we're reading. I don't think we said where we got it from. We don't want to be plagiarizing somebody's information. I'll let you do the reference. But that's just an indicator. And that was something they did, was to hit the pause button. And for us, we would do it more in the form of conflict resolution. We really wouldn't even do much talking about it. I would just write it down. Like, I'm not even going to address this. That was real stupid what he just said or what he just did. It was offensive to me. And so I would just write it down in my own little personal place. And then we had a regular time, I think of like Thursday nights at 9 or something. Night. Right. And so then we would address it then. We wouldn't even have any words about it at all, because we couldn't at that point.
All right. And the last one we're going to talk about tonight, attempt to come to a compromise or some type of understanding. In better words, get to a peaceful solution. That's where you're ultimately trying to reach. And sometimes that peaceful solution does come through the form of a mediator, because both of y'all have talked about or been in such anger or being upset that you can't hear each other. You're able to hear each other when somebody else says it to you. Yeah. And I'm, like she said, we've been to counseling with Bishop Bush. He could say the same thing, or Lady D could say the same thing that she said to me, but I heard it through them.
Brand new. Just a brand new revelation.
I just, there you go.
It's the truth. It's like a brand new revelation. Like, ooh, that was a epiphany.
Or I've heard, somebody else say something or done something to their wife that I've been close to doing. I'm like, oh, that's what she meant by that. Okay. So, sometimes you can hear each other, sometimes you can't. That's why it's good to have a mediator.
Okay, you already read what Bishop Bush wrote.
Conflicts have two references: the need for conversation and the need for consideration.
Yeah,
C&C.
Yeah, need for conversation. You do, and that's really a lot. That when you get into that point of fight, that's an identifier that issue has a need for conversation, and that issue has a need for some type of consideration.
Right.
Yeah, so that's an indicator.
It is. So with that said, we want to give credit for the information, a lot of the information we got tonight to Woody Schultz. Well, it don't matter. But we giving him credit for some of this information we brought to you tonight. But a lot of this information came from my own personal experiences and some of the counseling sessions we've been through. Do not look at your relationship beyond it's so perfect, or you can get through everything by yourself. Sometimes it is great to bring in a third party, a trusted third party. Hopefully somebody that's older, a little wiser, or got the skills or the education to help you deal with whatever you're dealing with.
And has a successful marriage. A lot of people have advice and opinions, but I caution you, do not take advice from people who don't have a successful marriage, or who had, maybe the husband's passed or wife is passed and they've had a successful marriage. But just because someone has been married doesn't mean that their marriage is of the sort that you want to take advice from. A lot of single people have marriage advice. I don't advise you take it. Marriage looks a whole lot different from the outside than what it does when you're actually in it. And when you're in it and you're trying to make it actually work, not you're trying to, when you're focused on, when divorce is a constant issue, when someone's in a marriage to where divorce is constantly at the forefront, that's not somebody you want to take advice from either. You want to examine the fruit, what kind of fruit their marriage is, and that's who you take. So you choose carefully who you choose to take advice from. Right. Nobody has a perfect marriage, and that's not even the goal. Okay, but the goal, you look for someone who has longevity is a good thing, and peace. When you can find somebody in a marriage that has peace and longevity, that might be somebody you want to consider, and particularly that has belief in God as a part of that marriage, because people do marriage a lot of different ways, but we certainly recommend using the Word of God as a guide.
Absolutely. All right. With that said, we want to thank y'all for joining us tonight. And we want to end this session from the lady and the coach. We love y'all. Good night.